The $5.2 million notification lit up my grandson's phone at exactly 3:47 p.m. By 4:15 p.m., a white Mercedes with Denver plates was parked in my driveway. My daughter, Dulcie, hadn't called in 15 years, not once. But somehow she knew about the money 38 minutes after the wire transfer hit. My autistic grandson, Tarek, started shaking the moment he saw her through the window. The same woman who abandoned him at age 3 because his meltdowns were too much work was now standing on my doorstep, designer handbag in hand, ready to claim her fair share of his app empire. I'm Chuck Peterson. 40 years as a lawyer taught me to recognize predators, and I was looking at the most dangerous kind, the one that shares your DNA. What happened next was a masterclass in cold legal justice. How I used every tool in my arsenal to protect my grandson from his own mother, and why sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to family is give them exactly what they deserve. If you're ready to see how a grandfather turns the law into a weapon, stick around. This story doesn't end the way you think it will. And make sure you're subscribed, because justice, this surgery, doesn't happen by accident. The hunt had begun, and this time the predator had no idea she was walking into a trap 15 years in the making. The story starts 15 years earlier, when everything I thought I knew about family crumbled in a single year. In 2009, Tarek was 3 years old, barely talking, overwhelmed by sounds and lights that the rest of us barely noticed. The autism diagnosis came on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because that same evening, Dulcie packed 2 suitcases and left a note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. He needs more than I can give. She was 20 years old then, barely more than a child herself. I told myself she'd come back when she was ready, when the weight of motherhood didn't feel so crushing. I was wrong. But Dulcie's abandonment wasn't the first betrayal that year. 6 months earlier, my wife Helen had walked into my home office and placed divorce papers next to my coffee cup. "I've been seeing someone," she said, her voice steady as a closing argument. "Richard Sterling, from the DA's office." Richard Sterling, the same prosecutor I'd been battling in court for 20 years. The same man who'd smiled and shook my hand at the Bar Association dinner just weeks before. Helen had been feeding him information about my cases, my strategies, my clients. The marriage was over before I even knew it was broken. By December 2009, I was 62 years old, recently retired from Peterson and Associates, and suddenly responsible for a nonverbal 3-year-old with autism spectrum disorder. The house in Austin felt too big and too quiet, except when Tarek had his meltdowns. Then it shook with the sound of a child who couldn't express what he needed. I had to learn everything from scratch. How to read his triggers. How fluorescent lights could send him into sensory overload. How routine wasn't just important, it was survival. Dr. Sarah Winchester, his pediatric psychiatrist, became my guide through this new world. "Tarek's different," she explained during our first consultation, "but different doesn't mean less. It means we need to find his language." His language turned out to be code. By age 7, while other kids were learning multiplication tables, Tarek was building basic apps on my old MacBook. By 12, he was designing interfaces that made communication easier for kids like him. By 15, he'd created the foundation for what would become MindBridge, an app that translated emotional states into visual patterns, helping neurodivergent individuals communicate their needs. The app launched 3 months ago when Tarek turned 18. Within 60 days, it had 6,500 active users and had generated $5.2 million in revenue. TechCrunch called it revolutionary, but Forbes featured Tarek as one of their under 20 innovators to watch. Dulcie called the day after the Forbes article went live. "I thought I'd built the perfect wall to protect us. Trust funds, legal guardianship documents, medical records establishing 15 years of continuous care. I'd learned from Helen's betrayal. This time, I documented everything. I was wrong about the wall being perfect. The white Mercedes in my driveway proved that some predators are patient enough to wait 15 years for the right moment to strike. And as I watched Dulcie walk up the front steps, her heels clicking with the confidence of someone who believed she was about to claim what she deserved, I realized this battle would require every skill I'd learned in 4 decades of legal warfare. Dulcie looked good. That was the first thing that struck me when I opened the door. 15 years had turned her from an overwhelmed 20-year-old into a polished 35-year-old woman. Designer handbag, professional highlights, the kind of confidence that came from marrying a Denver banker who made $185,000 a year. Hi, Dad. Her smile was perfect, practiced, warm, completely fake. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Greg and I were in Austin for business, and I thought, well, it's been too long. Behind her stood Greg Collins, her husband of 8 years. Nice enough guy from what I could tell during our brief phone conversations over the years. Right now, he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Dulcie, I didn't move from the doorway. This is unexpected. I know, I should have called. But I wanted to see Tarek, and you, of course. I've been following the news about his app. I'm so proud. Proud. The word hit like a physical blow. Proud of the grandson she'd abandoned. Proud of the success she'd had no part in creating. Tarek's not here, I lied smoothly. He's at his programming workshop. Actually, Tarek was upstairs in his room, probably listening to every word. The moment he'd seen the Mercedes through his window, he'd gone silent and retreated. 15 years later, his body still remembered the fear. That's okay, Dulcie said, stepping past me into the foyer without invitation. We can wait. Greg, don't just stand there. Greg followed reluctantly, his eyes apologetic. Mr. Peterson, good to see you again. I led them to the living room, my mind already cataloging everything they said, every gesture, every tell. Dulcie's eyes swept the room, taking inventory. The new leather furniture, the framed photos of Tarek's achievements, the original oil painting Helen had wanted in the divorce but never got. The house looks wonderful, Dulcie said, settling onto the couch like she belonged there. Very prosperous. There it was, the first probe. We've been comfortable, I said carefully. I'm sure, especially now with Tarek's success. $5.2 million. That's what TechCrunch reported, right? She knew the exact figure, not around 5 million or several million, the precise number that had been mentioned in exactly one paragraph of one article. You've been keeping track, I observed. Of course I have. He's my son. Greg shifted uncomfortably beside her. Dulcie. What? He is my son. Biologically, legally, he's mine. I may have made mistakes when he was younger, but I never stopped caring. Never stopped caring. Just stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped sending birthday cards or Christmas presents, stopped existing in his life for 15 years. And now that he's successful, I said, you've decided to reconnect. It's not about the money, Dad. I know that's what you're thinking, but it's not. Dulcie leaned forward, her expression earnest. Greg and I have been talking about having children. I want to understand autism better. I want to learn how to be the mother Tarek deserved. Beautifully delivered. Almost believable. If I hadn't spent 40 years reading juries and witnesses, I might have bought it. That's admirable, I said. Though 15 years is a long time to start learning. I know I wasn't ready then. I was young, scared, overwhelmed. But I'm different now. Stable, financially secure. She paused, letting that sink in. Well, mostly secure. Greg and I have been going through some difficulties, financial pressures, you know how it is. And there was the second probe, the setup for whatever came next. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning none of it. Medical bills, Greg said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the house. Dulcie's been having some health issues. The insurance doesn't cover everything. Dulcie shot him a look, sharp, warning. Apparently that wasn't part of the script. The point is, Dulcie continued smoothly, I want to be part of Tarek's life again. I've been researching my rights as his biological mother. I know I signed some papers when he was little, but circumstances change. People change. There it was. Not a reunion, not an apology, a legal claim. Papers? I asked, though I knew exactly which papers she meant. You know what papers. The temporary guardianship arrangement. But Tarek's 18 now, an adult. Those papers don't mean anything anymore. Wrong on multiple counts, but I didn't correct her. Not yet. I see, I said. And what exactly are you proposing? Dulcie smiled again, confident now. A partnership. Tarek needs family support to manage this kind of success. I want to help, to be involved, to make sure he makes smart decisions with his money. She didn't just want her fair share, she wanted it all. That evening, after Dulcie and Greg left for their hotel, I sat in my home office surrounded by 15 years of documentation. Medical records, school enrollment forms, insurance claims, tax returns where I'd claimed Tarek as a dependent every single year since 2009. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Jack Morrison. Jack, it's Chuck Peterson. I need a favor. Jack Morrison ran a private investigation firm that specialized in financial backgrounds for litigation. We'd worked together on dozens of cases when I was still practicing. Chuck, how's retirement treating you? It's about to get complicated. I need a background check. Dulcie Peterson Collins, currently residing in Denver. I need everything. Financial history, legal filings, credit reports. Can you have it by morning? For you, absolutely. What kind of timeline are we talking about? The faster the better. And Jack, I need this to be thorough. Someone's making a play for my grandson's money. Say no more. I'll have the preliminary report to you by 8 a.m. The preliminary report arrived at 7:43 a.m. via encrypted email. I printed every page and spread them across my dining room table like evidence in a murder trial. Dulcie Peterson Collins had filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy protection on March 15, 2024. Total debt, $89,000. The filing listed credit card debt, a defaulted car loan, and $23,000 in medical bills. But the interesting part wasn't the debt. It was the spending pattern in the months leading up to the bankruptcy. January 2024, $8,500 at Aspen Luxury Spa and Resort. February 2024, $12,000 at Nordstrom and Saks Fifth Avenue. March 2024, $15,500 deposit on a luxury condo in Vail. This wasn't someone struggling with medical bills. This was someone living beyond their means and using bankruptcy to escape the consequences. But the real revelation came on page 7 of the report. Dulcie had hired Brennan & Associates, a Denver family law firm, on October 18, 2024. The same day, Forbes published their article about Tarek. She'd been planning this for 6 months. My phone rang at 11:30 a.m. The caller ID showed Greg Collins' cell number. Mr. Peterson, it's Greg. Can we talk privately? What about? About what Dulcie's really planning, and why I think you need to know. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from Dulcie and away from Tarek. Greg looked like he hadn't slept. She's been tracking your finances since the app launched, he said without preamble. Bank records, property values, investment accounts. She hired a guy to do asset searches. Why are you telling me this? Greg stared into his coffee cup. Because I love my wife, but I won't help her destroy that kid. I've seen the photos, Mr. Peterson, the medical records from when Tarek was little. I know why he gets quiet when she raises her voice. The photos. I'd almost forgotten about those. What photos? From 2008, 2009, bruises on Tarek's arms, incident reports from his daycare. Dulcie told me he used to hurt himself during meltdowns, but the pattern, it didn't match self-harm. My hands tightened on the coffee cup. I'd suspected back then, the way Tarek flinched when Dulcie got frustrated, the way his meltdowns seemed worse after difficult days with her, but I'd never had proof. You're saying she hit him. I'm saying the evidence suggests she did, and now she wants access to his money. Greg leaned forward. Her lawyer thinks she has a case. Maternal rights, abandonment under duress, claims that you coerced her into signing away custody. And you believe that? I believe Dulcie sees $5.2 million and thinks it should be hers. The medical bills are real, but they're not the whole story. She's been talking about early retirement, about the house in Vail she's always wanted. Greg pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. A real estate listing for a $2.3 million ski chalet in Vail, Colorado. The listing was saved in Dulcie's favorites folder. 24 hours, Greg said. That's how long you have before her lawyer files the paperwork. I thought you should know. As he stood to leave, I caught his arm. Why are you doing this? Because I've seen what real parenting looks like, Mr. Peterson. And what you've done for that boy, that's love. What Dulcie's planning, that's just greed. 24 hours later, the demand letter arrived. The letter from Brennan and Associates arrived at 2:17 p.m. on a Friday, delivered by certified mail with the kind of legal weight designed to intimidate. I signed for it personally, noting the time, the delivery method, and the return address. Old habits. Peterson v. Peterson Collins, demand for parental rights recognition and asset distribution. Beautiful legal language, professionally crafted, and completely worthless. But they didn't know that yet. I called Catherine Bradley before I finished reading. Kate, it's Chuck Peterson. I need your help, and I need it fast. And Kate Bradley was 32 years old, Harvard Law, and the best family attorney in Austin. More importantly, she'd been Tarek's legal advocate when we'd established his educational accommodations 3 years ago. She knew the case, knew the players, and had no patience for parental abandonment cases. What's the situation, Chuck? My daughter wants to claim parental rights to access my grandson's assets. She's been gone 15 years. I have 48 hours to respond to a legal demand. I'll be there in an hour. Have every document ready, custody papers, medical records, financial statements, everything. While I waited for Kate, I climbed the stairs to my old home office and opened the fireproof safe I'd installed after Helen's betrayal. Inside were 15 years of documentation, organized chronologically in manila folders labeled with precise dates. Folder 1, Tarek Peterson, Legal Guardianship, 2009-2010, and the relinquishment papers were in pristine condition, notarized and witnessed, filed with Travis County Family Court on November 12, 2010. Dulcie's signature was clear and uncoerced. She'd voluntarily surrendered all parental rights in exchange for relief from child support obligations. But more importantly, she'd done it when Tarek was 4 years old, after a full year of attempting to parent him post-divorce, and after multiple documented incidents of what the court records delicately termed care provider stress responses. Folder 2, Medical Records, Dr. Sarah Winchester, 2009 to 2024. 127 documented appointments over 15 years. Speech therapy evaluations, behavioral assessments, medication adjustments, academic accommodations, and buried in the 2009 files, 3 incident reports from Tarek's daycare describing unexplained bruising consistent with grip marks on upper arms. I'd never pressed charges. Dulcie was barely 20, overwhelmed, and Tarek was safe with me. Sometimes mercy felt more important than justice. Not anymore. Folder 3, Financial Records, Trust Establishment, 2010-2024. The Charles Peterson Revocable Trust, established March 2010, with Tarek as sole beneficiary upon reaching age 25, or upon my death, whichever came first. Total assets, $2.1 million in diversified investments, plus the house, plus any future inheritances. The trust was bulletproof, irrevocable as of Tarek's 18th birthday. Dulcie couldn't touch it, even if she somehow regained parental rights. Kate arrived carrying her litigation bag and wearing the expression of someone ready for war. "Show me the demand letter first," she said, settling at my dining room table. I handed her the 3-page document. She read it twice, making notes in the margins. "Standard intimidation tactics," she said finally. "They're claiming abandonment under duress, coercion in the original custody agreement, and demanding both parental recognition and financial disclosure. It's aggressive, but not particularly creative. Can they win? Not with this evidence." Kate gestured at the folders. "But they can make it expensive and public. We need to end this fast and definitively." Kate opened her laptop and began typing. "We're going to do 3 things simultaneously. First, we're filing a motion to dismiss based on the 2010 relinquishment. Second, we're converting your revocable trust to an irrevocable special needs trust today, while Tarek is legally competent to consent. Third, we're establishing an LLC for Tarek's app ownership. An LLC? MindBridge Technologies LLC. Tarek will be the sole managing member, The app's intellectual property gets transferred to the LLC, and the LLC's operating agreement specifically excludes anyone who abandoned their parental duties for more than 12 consecutive months. Competence porn at its finest. Kate's fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting documents with surgical precision. I need you to call Dr. Winchester, Kate continued. We need a professional assessment of Tarek's current psychological state and his historical trauma response to maternal abandonment. If Dulcie's legal team wants to claim she's psychologically capable of resuming a parental role, we need expert testimony about the potential damage. I called Sarah Winchester while Kate drafted the LLC operating agreement. Chuck, what's wrong? Dulcie's back. She wants money and legal recognition as Tarek's mother. I need your help to stop her. Silence. Then, I'll prepare a comprehensive psychological evaluation by Monday. Chuck, that young man has spent 15 years healing from the damage she caused. I won't let her undo that progress. By 6 p.m., we had 3 legal documents ready for filing: a motion to dismiss with prejudice, articles of incorporation for MindBridge Technologies, LLC, and a petition for emergency protective orders preventing Dulcie from contacting Tarek, directly pending resolution of the custody dispute. Kate printed everything in triplicate, organized by urgency. The beauty of this approach, she explained, is that we're not fighting Dulcie's claims. We're making them irrelevant. Even if she somehow convinced a court she deserves parental recognition, she can't touch assets held in an irrevocable trust or an LLC that specifically excludes her. And if she escalates? Kate smiled with the kind of confidence that came from 15 years of family law practice. Then we escalate too. I have a countersuit drafted that includes claims for intentional abandonment, emotional abuse, and vexatious litigation. Her Denver lawyer won't want to risk exposing Dulcie to that level of scrutiny. By Sunday evening, everything was filed and served. The legal fortress was complete. Now I was ready for war. The family mediation meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, 10 a.m., at the offices of Bradley and Associates. I'd insisted on neutral ground, professional setting, complete documentation. Dulcie's lawyer, Jonathan Brennan, had agreed readily, probably thinking he'd have the home field advantage in a formal legal environment. He was wrong. I arrived 30 minutes early, carrying a briefcase that contained 15 years of evidence organized in trial-ready binders. Kate met me in the conference room where she'd already set up the recording equipment. Remember, Kate said quietly, this isn't mediation. It's binding arbitration. Once they agree to the process, they can't back out of the decision. They know that? They know we called it mediation. The arbitration clause is buried in paragraph 12 of the agreement they signed yesterday. Classic Kate, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Dulcie and Greg arrived at 9:58 a.m., followed by Jonathan Brennan, a silver-haired man in his 50s who carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a parental rights case. Dulcie looked nervous but determined, wearing a conservative business suit that screamed responsible mother. Thank you all for coming, Kate began once everyone was seated. Before we start, I need everyone to acknowledge that you've read and agreed to the terms of today's proceeding. Brennan nodded confidently. Standard mediation protocol. We're here to reach an amicable resolution. Excellent. For the record, you're acknowledging that this is a binding arbitration proceeding under Texas Family Code Section 153, 7-1, and that any agreement reached today will be legally enforceable. Brennan's confidence flickered. I thought this was mediation. You signed the arbitration agreement yesterday, Kate said smoothly. Would you like to review the documents? Too late to back out now. Brennan glanced at Dulcie, who nodded slightly. They were committed. Let's begin, Kate continued. Ms. Peterson Collins, you're claiming parental rights to Tarek Peterson and demanding access to assets held in his name. Is that correct? Yes, Dulcie said, her voice steady. I'm his biological mother. I made mistakes when I was young, but I never legally terminated my rights. I see. Kate opened the first binder. Could you explain this document dated November 12th, 2010? She slid the relinquishment papers across the table. Dulcie's face went pale. Those were temporary arrangements. I was under duress. My father pressured me into signing. Pressured how? Kate asked. I was young, overwhelmed, dealing with postpartum depression. Ms. Peterson Collins, I interrupted. Tarek was 4 years old when you signed those papers. You'd been attempting to parent him for a full year after the custody arrangement. That's hardly postpartum depression. Dulcie's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the financial stress, the judgment from everyone. The medical bills? Kate asked innocently. Let's talk about financial stress. She opened the second binder, Jack Morrison's investigation report. According to public records, you filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy in March 2024. Total debt, $89,000. However, in the 3 months preceding that filing, you spent over $36,000 on luxury goods and vacation deposits. Brennan leaned forward. What's the relevance? The relevance, Kate continued, is that Mrs. Peterson Collins claimed financial hardship as justification for seeking access to her son's assets, while simultaneously spending tens of thousands of dollars on non-essential purchases. She pulled out a color printout of the Vale condo listing, including a deposit on a $2.3 million ski chalet. Dulcie's face flushed. That's not... We were just looking... You were looking, I said quietly, at how to spend Tarek's money before you'd even established a legal claim to it. Kate opened the third binder, Dr. Winchester's psychological evaluation. Ms. Peterson Collins, were you aware that your son required therapy for abandonment-related anxiety? That he still has panic responses to unexpected visitors? That his educational accommodations specifically list maternal abandonment trauma as a contributing factor to his social anxiety? I didn't know, Dulcie whispered. You didn't know because you never asked, I said. In 15 years, you never called Dr. Winchester. Never attended a parent-teacher conference. Never visited him in the hospital when he had his appendectomy 3 years ago. I sent cards. You sent nothing, Kate said firmly. She opened the fourth binder, documentation of every birthday, every Christmas, every major life event. 15 years of radio silence until the Forbes article was published. Brennan was frantically taking notes, probably calculating how quickly he could withdraw from the case. Mr. Brennan, Kate said, I assume you've reviewed the 2010 relinquishment papers and the documentation of abandonment and the irrevocable trust structures that protect Tarek's assets regardless of custody determinations? Brennan looked at Dulcie, then at his notes. Perhaps we should consider alternative arrangements, such as visitation rights, family counseling, a graduated reintegration plan that doesn't involve financial claims. Dulcie stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. He's my son. I have rights. You have nothing, I said, rising to face her. You signed away your rights 15 years ago. You abandoned a 4-year-old child with autism because it was inconvenient. And now you want to waltz back into his life because he's successful. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the recording equipment. The arbitration decision, Kate announced, is that Dulcie Peterson Collins has no legal claim to custody, visitation, or financial access regarding Tarek Peterson. This decision is final and binding. Dulcie looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen since the day Helen said goodbye. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel sorry for her. The house felt different when I got home, quieter, emptier. Victory didn't sound like I'd expected it to. Tarek was in the kitchen making his after-school snack with the same precise routine he'd followed for 8 years. Wheat bread, toasted for exactly 90 seconds. Peanut butter spread to all 4 corners. No jelly, too unpredictable in texture. Glass of milk, exactly 6 ounces, served at room temperature. How did it go? He asked without looking up from his methodical preparation. It's over, I said. She can't make any legal claims. You're safe. Tarek nodded slowly, processing the information the way he processed everything, carefully, completely, without wasted emotion. Good, he said finally. I was worried she might try to change things. Change things. 15 years of careful routine, behavioral therapy, educational accommodations, and social skill development. Tarek's world worked because it was consistent, predictable, safe. Dulcie's return had threatened all of that, but sitting at my kitchen table, watching my grandson eat his precisely constructed sandwich, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just destroyed what was left of my family. My phone rang at 7:30 p.m. Greg Collins. Mr. Peterson, I heard about the arbitration. I wanted you to know, Dulcie and I are separating. I felt a stab of something, guilt, regret, responsibility. Greg, I'm sorry. Don't be. This isn't about what happened today. This is about who she's become, what she was willing to do to that boy. His voice was tired, defeated. I can't be married to someone who would exploit her own child for money. Where will you go? Back to my place in Denver. The divorce papers are already filed. I'm sorry she dragged you into this, Mr. Peterson. You didn't deserve it. After he hung up, I sat in my study, surrounded by the legal documents that had saved Tarek's future. Trust modifications, LLC operating agreements, protective orders, arbitration decisions. 40 years as a lawyer, and I'd never felt less certain about justice. Had I protected Tarek, or had I simply proven that I was better at legal warfare than my daughter? Had I done what was necessary, or had I destroyed any chance of genuine reconciliation? The questions followed me through 3 sleepless nights. On Thursday evening, I found myself staring at an old photo from 2008. Dulcie holding 2-year-old Tarek at a family barbecue, both of them smiling, both of them unaware of what was coming. She'd been so young, overwhelmed, unprepared for the challenges of raising a special needs child. Maybe I could have done more to help her then. Maybe I could have fought harder to keep the family together instead of just protecting Tarek after it fell apart. Maybe mercy would have been stronger than law. But then Tarek knocked on my study door, carrying a handwritten letter. I wrote something, he said quietly, for her. I think you should read it first. I took the letter with hands that trembled slightly, wondering what my grandson had learned about forgiveness and family in 15 years of watching his grandfather choose protection over reconciliation. Tarek's letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in the careful penmanship his occupational therapist had worked on for years. I read it twice, my respect for my grandson growing with every paragraph. Dear Dulcie, it began, I know you prefer that to Mom, since you never really were one to me. Direct, honest, no wasted words, pure Tarek. Grandpa thinks he protected me from you, but I remember more than he knows. I remember the yelling when I couldn't stop crying. I remember the way you used to grip my arms when I had meltdowns. I remember the day you left, and I remember being relieved. My chest tightened. In 15 years, Tarek had never talked about those early memories. I'd assumed they'd faded, become vague childhood impressions. I was wrong. But I also remember the good things, the way you used to sing to me before bed, the Mickey Mouse pancakes you made on Saturday mornings, the way you tried to understand why loud noises scared me. The letter continued for 2 more pages, acknowledging both the damage and the love, the abandonment and the attempts at connection. It was mature, thoughtful, and completely devastating in its honesty. I don't hate you, the letter concluded. I don't even blame you anymore, but I also don't need you in my life now. Grandpa gave me something you couldn't: stability, safety, the space to become who I am without fear. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be on my terms. No claims to my money, no attempts to be the mother you chose not to be. Just maybe we could start as strangers who share some DNA and see if there's anything worth building from there. I'm willing to try if you are. But if you're not ready to accept that I don't owe you anything, not forgiveness, not access, not money, then please just leave me alone. Sincerely, Tarek Peterson. When I finished reading, I looked up to find Tarek watching me carefully. It's good, I said, my voice rougher than intended. Very good. You sure about this? I've been thinking about it since she showed up. I'm not a little kid anymore, Grandpa. I can make my own decisions about relationships. He was right. 18 years old, legally an adult, financially independent, and emotionally more mature than most people twice his age. What made you decide to reach out? Tarek was quiet for a moment, processing the question with his characteristic thoroughness. Dr. Winchester always says that healing happens when we choose our response instead of reacting from trauma. I've been reacting to Dulcie my whole life, hiding, panicking, letting fear make my decisions. He paused. I want to choose my response this time. Well, that weekend, MindBridge hit a new milestone: 10,000 active users and 6.8 million in total revenue. Tarek had been featured on 3 podcasts about neurodevelopmental innovation, and 2 major universities had reached out about incorporating his communication protocols into their autism research programs. But more importantly, Tarek had also drafted a business plan for using MindBridge's profits to fund a scholarship program for abandoned special needs children. $500,000 allocated over 5 years, providing educational support and therapeutic services for kids whose parents couldn't or wouldn't advocate for them. Kids like I was, Tarek explained simply. Watching him work on the scholarship proposal, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For 15 years, I'd seen my role as protecting Tarek from the world. Now I was watching him engage with it, on his own terms, with his own values, using his success to help others. I was proud, and I was also terrified, because on Monday morning an email arrived from Dulcie's personal account, not her lawyer's office. The subject line read, Tarek's letter. Can we talk? Dulcie's email was short, unlawyered, and desperate. Dad, I'm in Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital in Denver, room 314, stress-induced cardiac episode. I know you have no reason to believe me or care, but I read Tarek's letter. I need to talk to both of you. Not about money, about everything else. Dulcie. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes before calling Greg. Mr. Peterson, I was wondering if you'd call. Is she really in the hospital? She is. Admitted yesterday morning, chest pains, elevated blood pressure, panic attacks. The doctors think it's stress-related, but they're keeping her for observation. He paused. I'm still her emergency contact. They called me at midnight. Are you going? I don't know. Our divorce papers are filed, but... His voice trailed off. She's still my wife. For now. Greg, I need you to be honest with me. Is this manipulation? Another play for sympathy? I don't think so. She collapsed in her lawyer's office yesterday morning, right after she fired him. Brennan called me, said she walked in, told him to drop the case, and then just broke down. She'd fired her lawyer. That changed things. I called Kate Bradley. Kate, hypothetically, if Dulcie wanted to contact Tarek directly, would that violate the protective order? Not if Tarek consents to the contact. He's 18. He can waive protection if he chooses. Why? She's in a Denver hospital. Claims it's stress-related. Wants to talk to us. Chuck. Kate's voice carried a warning. Don't let guilt override good judgment. This could be another manipulation. Could be, but what if it's not? That evening I showed Tarek the email. He read it twice, then set down his laptop and looked at me with those serious dark eyes that had always seemed too old for his face. Do you want to go? He asked. It's not about what I want. It's about what you're comfortable with. That's not what I asked. I sat down across from him at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals, homework sessions, and quiet conversations about everything from calculus to social cues. I keep thinking about your mother and me, I said finally. Helen. When she left, I never gave her a chance to explain. Never tried to understand why she felt trapped enough to betray me. I just cut her off. Used the law to protect myself from being hurt again. And you think you did the same thing with Dulcie? I think I'm very good at building walls to protect the people I love. Sometimes too good. Tarek nodded slowly. Dr. Winchester says that healing requires taking controlled risks. Maybe this is one of those. You want to go to Denver? I want to see if she meant what she said in her email about it not being about money. He paused. But if we go with conditions. Clear boundaries. No promises except to listen. 2 days later, we were on a Southwest Airlines flight to Denver, carrying a briefcase containing what Kate called insurance, legal documents that would make any future claims by Dulcie impossible to pursue, just in case. Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital smelled like antiseptic and floor wax. Room 314 was in the cardiac wing, which lent credibility to the medical emergency claim. Dulcie was sitting up in bed when we arrived, wearing a hospital gown and looking smaller than I'd seen her since she was a teenager. Greg was there too, sitting in the visitor's chair with the awkward posture of someone who didn't know if he belonged. "You came," Dulcie said softly when she saw us in the doorway. "Tarek wanted to," I said carefully. "We're here to listen, nothing more." Dulcie's eyes filled with tears when she saw Tarek. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen in the arbitration, but the kind of raw emotion that comes with genuine regret. "You look so much like your father," she said. "Like my father, I mean. The strong jaw, the serious expression." "Dulcie," I warned. We hadn't come for family resemblances. I know," she wiped her eyes. "Tarek, I read your letter probably 50 times. You were right about everything. I wasn't ready to be a mother. I was selfish. I abandoned you when you needed me most." "Yes," Tarek said simply. "You did." "The money thing, that was desperation, not entitlement. Greg and I are getting divorced. My job is ending. The bankruptcy is destroying my credit. When I saw how successful you'd become, I thought—" She stopped, took a breath. "I thought maybe you owed me something for the 9 months I carried you, for the 2 years I tried to figure out how to love you the way you deserved." "I don't owe you anything," Tarek said quietly, "but I might choose to give you something anyway, if you can prove you've changed." Dulcie looked at him with something like hope. "What would I have to prove?" "That you can put someone else's needs before your own," Tarek said. "That you can accept boundaries. That you can be honest about your mistakes without making excuses." "And if I can?" "Then maybe we can find out if strangers who share DNA can become something like family." For the first time in 15 years, I thought that might actually be possible. Dulcie was discharged from the hospital the next morning with a prescription for anxiety medication and a cardiology follow-up in 2 weeks. Before we left Denver, I insisted on having the conversation that would determine whether reconciliation was possible. We met in Greg's apartment, neutral ground for a family that had been destroyed by competing claims of territory. Greg made coffee while I pulled out the documents Kate had prepared before we left Austin. "This isn't a legal contract," I explained to Dulcie. "It's a family agreement. You can walk away from it any time. But if you want a relationship with Tarek, these are the conditions." Dulcie nodded, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug like it was anchoring her to the table. "First condition: no financial claims against Tarek's assets, now or ever. No inheritance expectations. No family business discussions. Your relationship with him can't be contingent on his financial success." "I understand." "Second, any contact with Tarek goes through me for the first 6 months. Scheduled visits, supervised interactions, no surprise appearances. You need to prove you can respect boundaries before you get privacy with him. That's fair." Third, weekly therapy sessions with a licensed family therapist who specializes in abandonment trauma. You need to understand the damage you caused and how to avoid causing more. Dulcie's voice was smaller when she answered. "I already found someone. Dr. Rebecca Martinez. She has an opening next week." I was surprised by the initiative. It was the first proactive step I'd seen Dulcie take in 15 years. Fourth, no public statements about your relationship with Tarek. No social media posts. No interviews about his success. No attempts to capitalize on his achievements for your own benefit. "I deleted my Facebook account yesterday," Dulcie said quietly. "I don't want people to know I'm his mother until I've earned the right to say that." Tarek spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. "There's a fifth condition." We all looked at him. "I want you to volunteer with the scholarship program I'm starting, 20 hours a month, working with abandoned special needs children. I want you to see what it's like from their perspective." Dulcie's face crumpled. "Tarek, I don't know if I can handle that. Being around children who've been through what you went through." "Then you're not ready for a relationship with me," Tarek said simply. "Because understanding that pain is the only way you'll understand what you did." Greg reached across the table and touched Dulcie's hand. "She'll do it," he said softly. "Won't you?" Dulcie looked around the table, at Greg, who was choosing to support her despite their divorce proceedings, at me, who had every reason to refuse her any chance at redemption, at Tarek, who was offering forgiveness with conditions instead of unconditional acceptance. Yes, she said finally. I'll do it. I pulled out a pen and set it beside the agreement. These conditions are in effect for 1 year. After that, if everyone agrees, we can renegotiate. If you violate any condition, contact with Tarek ends permanently. Dulcie signed without hesitation. There's one more thing, I said. I need you to understand why I fought you so hard. It wasn't because I hate you. It's because I love him more than I hate what you did. I know, Dulcie whispered. I hated you for a while because you were the father to him that I couldn't be a mother to him. But I knew he was safe with you. I knew you'd protect him from people like me. People like who you were, Tarek corrected gently. Not necessarily who you are now. 6 months later, Dulcie had kept every condition of the agreement. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, 25 hours a month volunteering with the Mind Bridge Foundation's scholarship program, scheduled visits with Tarek every other weekend, initially supervised, then gradually independent as trust was rebuilt. The relationship that emerged wasn't motherhood. That ship had sailed 15 years ago. It was something smaller and more fragile, but also more honest. Dulcie became someone who remembered Tarek's birthday, who called before major exams, who listened to his programming challenges without offering unsolicited advice. She became, as Tarek had written in his letter, a stranger with shared DNA who was building something worth having. Greg and Dulcie's divorce was finalized in December, but they remained friends, better friends than they'd been spouses. He moved back to Denver permanently, started dating a nurse from his cardiac rehab program, and sent Tarek Christmas presents that showed he'd actually listened to their conversations. On the first anniversary of that arbitration decision, I updated my will to reflect the new family dynamic. Tarek remained the primary beneficiary, but Dulcie was included as a conditional secondary beneficiary, if and only if she maintained the reconciliation agreement for a full 5 years. Not because she deserved it, but because forgiveness with accountability was stronger than justice without compassion. 2 years after Dulcie showed up in my driveway, I sat in my study updating the Mind Bridge Foundation's annual report. The numbers told a remarkable story. $8.3 million in total app revenue, 15,000 active users across 12 countries, and $750,000 distributed in scholarships to 127 abandoned special needs children. Tarek had built something that mattered. More importantly, he'd learned to navigate relationships on his own terms. Dulcie visited once a month now, usually staying for Sunday dinner and helping with foundation paperwork. They weren't mother and son. That relationship had been forfeited 15 years ago, but they'd become something like family friends who shared a complicated history. She'd completed her volunteer requirement 18 months ahead of schedule, working 40 hours a month with scholarship recipients instead of the required 20. Dr. Martinez said Dulcie had developed genuine empathy for abandoned children, not just performative compliance with Tarek's conditions. Progress, not perfection. Greg had remarried the previous spring, the cardiac nurse, Linda, who turned out to be warm, funny, and completely uninterested in Tarek's money. Their wedding was small, informal, and included both Dulcie and Tarek among the guests. Not because they were family, but because forgiveness had made friendship possible. My own perspective had evolved as well. For 40 years as a lawyer, I'd believed that justice required clear winners and losers, that mercy was weakness in expensive clothing. Watching Tarek navigate the complexities of conditional forgiveness had taught me something different. Justice wasn't about punishment. It was about consequences that promoted growth. Mercy wasn't about erasing damage. It was about choosing to rebuild something better from the pieces left behind. The trust documents I was reviewing reflected this new understanding. Tarek's inheritance was structured to promote his independence while supporting his advocacy work. Dulcie's conditional inclusion recognized change without rewarding abandonment. The Foundation's endowment would continue supporting abandoned children long after both Tarek and I were gone. Legal structures that prioritized healing over revenge, accountability over retribution. Tarek knocked on my study door, the same gentle three-tap pattern he'd used since childhood. "Grandpa, there's someone here to see you." I followed him to the front door, where a young woman stood, holding the hand of a 6-year-old boy with the serious expression I recognized from 15 years of raising Tarek. "Mr. Peterson, I'm Jennifer Walsh. This is my son Tyler. We got your information from the Foundation's website." She paused. "Tyler was diagnosed with autism last month. His father left yesterday. I don't know what to do." I knelt down to Tyler's eye level, remembering another scared little boy who needed someone to understand that different wasn't less. "Would you like to come in?" I asked gently. Tarek was just showing me his latest app features. He could use someone to test them. Tyler nodded silently, and I saw in his eyes the same combination of intelligence and vulnerability that had driven me to become a grandfather instead of just a legal guardian 15 years ago. The cycle continued, but this time with better tools, stronger support systems, and the hard-earned wisdom that love required boundaries to survive. Some families are born, others are built, one careful choice at a time, from the pieces that remain after betrayal has done its worst. Both kinds are worth fighting for.